card debt, get cash, and lower your payments an average of $640 a month. New Day will even pay for your appraisal, worth up to $500 or more. So if you need money to take care of your family, use the valuable VA home loan benefit you've earned with your service. Call New Day USA.
Go to newdayusa.com or call 1-855-473-6526.
This is Joanne. Her long day as a hairstylist starts with shoulder pain when, hey Joanne, want to trade the all-day relief of 2 Aleve with 6 Tylenol?
Give up my 2 Aleve for 6 Tylenol? No thanks. For me, it's Aleve.
This is Crab Fest at Red Lobster. And right now, we're serving up more delicious crab than ever. Classic favorites like Crab Lover's Dream and new dishes like Southern King Crab. And dueling crab legs with delicious Dungeness. And right now, we're serving up... It's all happening at Crab Fest. And Crab Fest is only happening at Red Lobster. Now this is seafood.
Managing blood sugar is a series of smart choices. And when you replace one meal or snack a day with Glucerna, made with Carb Steady to help minimize blood sugar spikes, you can really feel it. Now with 30% less carbs and sugars. Glucerna.
What are they doing? They're using automation to cut errors and build apps faster.
But why aren't they yelling? Yeah, where's all the chaos?
Yeah, the frustration. The anguish. It's a modern software factory. We don't really do anguish.
Beyond is a natural pet food that goes beyond assuming ingredients are safe to knowing they are. Going beyond expectations because our pets deserve it. Beyond. Natural pet food.
Every weeknight.
All of a sudden, you're not allowed to ask sincere questions.
For unmatched insight, powerful opinion, and must-see debate, you have to watch Tucker Carlson Tonight, weeknights at 8.
The sun used to make our outdoor deck and patio space so hot and uncomfortable.
Retractable awning opens and closes in just 60 seconds. It keeps our patio about 20 degrees cooler.
It provides instant shade and instant protection from the sun's harmful rays.
And our sunsetter costs under $700.
But now you can get your sunsetter for as little as $599 when you call now to get this special $200 discount certificate and free awning idea kit.
We love our sunsetter retractable awning, and you're going to love yours too.
Sunsetter awnings are assembled in America and guaranteed to last for years. So call now to get this free awning idea kit with DVD, plus your $200 sunsetter discount certificate.
But this is a limited time offer.
Call now.
Call now for your free awning idea kit with DVD and $200 discount certificate. There's no obligation.
We are awaiting a significant moment now on Capitol Hill where senior advisor to President Trump, Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, as we all know him, is expected to leave Capitol Hill after giving testimony before, privately, the Senate Intelligence Committee. And we are anticipating then that he will go to the White House, where he is set to step up to the microphones and make a statement about his meeting today. At Question, of course, we have been talking about what types of meetings and with whom he might have met among Russian officials, and so he's being asked about that on the record today, but in a private behind closed doors meeting. As Jared Kushner steps up to the mics, we'll bring it to you live. But one of the other things that's cooking along here on Capitol Hill, of course, is we're waiting to see what are they going to vote on this week with regard to health care. President Trump has been planning to speak later today on health care, and he will also meet with what the White House calls Obamacare victims. This after the president turned up the heat on GOP lawmakers over the weekend by tweeting this: "If Republicans don't repeal and replace the disastrous Obamacare, the repercussions will be far greater than any of them understand!" Exclamation point. The Senate is expected to vote this week on a GOP health care bill, but it's unclear if that will be repeal only or repeal and replace, or what exactly that will look like. So, how does the Senate move forward at this point? Senator John Thune says that's up to the majority leader. Watch.
That's a judgment that Senator McConnell will make at some point this week before the vote, depending on how these discussions go. One way or the other, we need to get on the bill in order to have that debate. And the leader will make that decision at some point about whether that's repeal and replace. I hope it's repeal and replace. But which camp you're in, you can't have a debate about either unless we get on the bill. So we need a yes vote. That's the only way to change the status quo.
Wow, and around we go. Meanwhile, one of the moderate holdouts not happy about the uncertainty surrounding the legislation.
We don't know whether we're going to be voting on the House bill, the first version of the Senate bill, the second version of the Senate bill, a new version of the Senate bill, or a 2015 bill that would have repealed the Affordable Care Act now and then said that somehow we'll figure out a replacement over the next 2 years. I don't think that's a good approach to facing legislation that affects millions of people and 1/6 of our economy.
My brain hurts after that. Anyway, this is another holdout. Senator Rand Paul says he only will support a clean repeal. You're laughing at what I said, but it gives me a brain cramp. I mean, it's like, I guess if you want to use the excuse we're not going to do anything, then just talk in circles as much as you're walking in circles.
And that's basically what they've been doing. I mean, Rand Paul, who says he'll only vote in favor of the repeal only, was the one who went to the White House back this winter and said to President Trump, we can't do repeal only. We've got to do repeal and replace together. And after that meeting, he tweeted out, I met with President Trump. He's agreed to do repeal and replace together. That had not been the plan that the House leadership in particular had. They, starting in November, right after the election, they wanted to do repeal, delay,
yeah, but
replace.
You can't argue with the fact that they got on the record, Kennedy, back in 2016 with President Obama at the helm, and this group of Republicans on the Hill said, oh, you know, I think we can do repeal, full well knowing that they were going to veto it.
Yeah, it's the easiest way to do it. I mean, it's super easy to ask the prom queen on a date when you know she's going to say no. Who cares? But then, you know, what if she says yes and you actually have to take her out to dinner? You know, what, you gonna pony up for the steak? And the problem here is my biggest problem in Senator Paul's defense.
There's always food in every example you give. Anyway, go on.
Not with the House, unless you're eating termites, which I don't recommend. Although I do hear they are a perfect.
Oh Lord!
Having said all of this, in Senator Paul's defense, let's go to Jared Kushner.
All right, Jared Kushner coming down the hill at Capitol Hill right now, coming down the hall, I should say, escorted as we see. So he is on his way now after leaving that Senate Intel Committee meeting where he gave on the record but private testimony before the senators, is now headed to the White House. We have not been given any notes on what he might say, but we do anticipate that he'll speak somewhat about today's meeting as he heads to the White House to do that.
He appears to be smiling.
Well, why not? I mean, you know, Stephen, you said this before. You get on the record right now and you start to own the narrative a little bit more. You hit the questions that are there. This is not a public spectacle in the meeting. He can say what he wants in a statement and you move on.
Right. And if everything that he testified to is basically the statement that he put out this morning, which is this broad explanation of his contacts with the Russians, why he didn't disclose them, how they're not problematic, if that's the ground truth, then he should be smiling. Then he can walk out and say, look, I understand why this looks suspicious or why we might have handled this better, but there's really nothing there. If, on the other hand, there's not, he's smiling.
But as you can imagine,
forcing a smile because he's worried about what might come later.
That was probably an intense round of questioning that he did just receive. So his head was held up high. He was smiling ear to ear. You can say maybe that was forced, but certainly he was able to muster one, even if it was an intense round of questioning.
Think of the target he has on his back, though, right now. Internally within the White House, there's a whole crew of people that don't like him or his wife and feel that they have too much influence with the president. And then, of course, externally, you got a ton of reporters that are trying to solve for an equation that a crime, shall we say, that they believe happened, and they want to pin this on him. So he's in a very difficult and delicate spot.
You know what I noticed he's not doing today, though, and we had been led to believe that one of the things that Jared Kushner would be doing is to go to Israel and try to help broker that Palestinian-Israel peace deal. And look at what's happened now with the recent terrorism. And we are having to send an envoy today to Israel, per this administration, to try to get some sort of peace after all the violence and death that have happened in recent days between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Many Israeli citizens killed.
Yeah, and
so you look at that and you look at the job that Jared Kushner was called to do and the job that he's not doing now because he's testifying on Capitol Hill.
Yeah, and it makes it a much more fluid situation, and that fluid tragedy, unfortunately, sort of overrides the goodwill that this administration has toward crafting some sort of peace between Palestine and Israel. But it's interesting because they are taking such a different approach, and we really haven't haven't seen publicly what Jared Kushner's philosophy is over there and how his influence might take hold. And I think with all that's going on right now in his personal and professional life domestically and what's happening in Israel, it's not a good time, as the president has redirected and sort of healed some of the chasms in this country by going overseas. It looks like Jared Kushner, to your point, won't have that same opportunity in Israel.
So the optics have changed. We are now leaving Capitol Hill because Jared Kushner is leaving Capitol Hill, and he's headed here to what we call the sticks outside the White House. That's our fancy way of saying microphones, and this is the area where many people who come out of the White House as guests will often step up and give a statement. Sometimes they take questions. We're not led to believe that this will be more than a statement, but we're going to stay on it by Jared Kushner. You know, Stephen, I know that people have speechwriters for all different facets in life within politics. Is this a statement you write yourself? Will this be lawyerized? What do you anticipate?
Well, I would expect that it would certainly be lawyerized. His lawyer, Abby Lowell, is a prominent and very well thought of criminal defense lawyer, smart guy. I imagine everything that we saw before. So not a from the heart type of thing.
This is on the record type of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I would think he would be giving it, you know, a shorter version of what we heard from him earlier today.
What does he have to say to move the story forward and in a positive direction for him?
Well, I think if he can give people, you know, a shorter version of what he said before, and if he answers questions in such a way,
directly,
yeah, that show him to be direct and authoritative in this understanding of his narrative, I think that'll help him. I think what his critics are likely to point to is to say all of these meetings that he said happened, or these 4 meetings, these 4 contacts that have happened in the past that he didn't recall and didn't disclose, he now has lots of information about them. I mean, the statement he put out today was very thorough, had detailed information in them, and I think people will point to the tension.
So as we await Jared Kushner's arrival at the White House, he just left the Capitol after this round of behind closed door questioning. He's making his way to the White House. Let's get to Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge. She was there today, and she's possibly got a little bit of a look at what we can expect now as we await a statement from Jared Kushner. Catherine?
Okay, so yeah, thanks, Sandra. Jared Kushner arrived here on the Senate side of Capitol Hill about an hour and 45 minutes ago. We were out at the C Street entrance and threw some questions to him when he arrived with his attorney, Abby Lowell. He didn't take our questions. He sort of smiled and waved for reporters. He then went to the Senate office, if you will, not the committee hearing room, and he met with Senate staffers on both sides of the aisle to answer their questions. There's been a lot of discussion this morning about why this was not under oath, but a Senate staffer emphasized to me that, you know, lying to Congress is lying to Congress, regardless of whether you're under oath or not. And they described this as sort of a fact-finding discussion. They wanted to try and clarify the statement that he's provided for the record and the specifics of these meetings that he had with the Russians, which he has billed as not of any consequence, and certainly no coordination with the Russians over the campaign. He just left here a few minutes ago, smiling, did not take questions again. We now understand that he's heading over to the White House, but we don't anticipate that this is really the first and last appearance of Jared Kushner on Capitol Hill. We know he's coming tomorrow to speak to members of this House Intelligence Committee that's running its own Russia investigation. And like today, that is also going to...
Hey, you! Where'd you get that?
Hyundai.
Long-term commitment?
No, short-term lease.
That he's trying to be cooperative, and also that he felt that there was nothing nefarious about this contact over the last year. Sandra.
All right. Harris, you wanted to jump in with a question?
Yeah, Catherine, it's Harris. I'm just curious, in your years of experience, if there has been reportedly much of a difference between handing someone an 11-page statement, going into a closed-door session versus going public and testifying publicly.
Well, what I would say from my experience is that it's very standard for a very important witness, and I think we can all agree that Jared Kushner is an important witness in the Russia investigation, to have what I would call an initial contact or initial meeting with Senate staffers. We were told that there might be senators in the meeting this morning, but it was primarily staffers from the Democratic side as well as the Republican side, and they're kind of trying to flesh out the information, right? They're trying to figure out what the questions would be if they go forward with another round of questioning, or in the end they ask for a public hearing on the matter. So that of itself is not unusual. I think folks at home understand that a public hearing watched by, millions of people, probably in this case, somewhat like the FBI director, would be something of just a different degree of pressure, right? He met behind closed doors today, but that's not that unusual in a case like this to have that kind of initial contact or initial appearance here.
Thank you so much. I think a lot of people wonder about the politics and all of this, and when you go behind closed doors, can you do away with that and just get to the question and answers? Trish?
Yeah, well, speaking to the politics of it, Catherine, it's Trish. How much of this do you think is related to the fact that he is the son-in-law of the president and therefore has a lot of influence with the Oval Office? If you compare that with if he were just an advisor, would he be under the gun in such a way that we now see? In your perspective?
Well, I don't want to offer speculation to people at home. I mean, you just simply have to read his 11-page statement, and he outlines in great detail the contacts he says he had with officials linked or representing the Russian government, and then he makes his argument as to why he believes these contacts were not nefarious. I mean, simply by virtue of the fact that he was a central participant in the Trump campaign makes his statements about those meetings very significant, regardless of his connection to Ivanka Trump. But I would encourage people at home to go to foxnews.com and read the entire 11 pages for themselves, and then they can make up their own minds whether they find his rationale believable or really whether it requires further explanation.
Yeah, and some comprehensive reporting there if people want to get some background. Hi, Catherine, it's Kennedy. Quick question, how does today's closed-door session influence some of the questions that the Intelligence Committee will ask also behind closed doors of Don Jr. and Paul Manafort?
Just repeat the first part of your question again. I'm sorry, there's a lot of breakup because there are a lot of reporters right here, and I missed the top of it, Kennedy.
It's probably because I have AT&T. How does today's questioning with the Senate Intelligence Committee, how does that influence some of the questioning we will not be privy to later in the week between the committee, Paul Manafort and Don Jr.?
Well, what I would say on that point, and I want to stick to the facts here, is that remember, every congressional committee is running an independent investigation along their own lane, if you will. I would not expect that members of the Senate committee would share information with Senate Judiciary or House Intelligence. Really, the person they're dealing with primarily is the special counsel Robert Mueller and his office, because they're trying to avoid any conflicts between the special counsel and what's happening here on Capitol Hill. So to answer your question, I haven't seen any evidence that staffers are sharing information about their conversations, but I'd leave the door open at this point because this is not a very typical story. I guess I could say that.
Catherine Herridge, we will come back to you as the news warrants this hour as we await Jared Kushner to step up to the microphones outside the White House. Thank you, Catherine, very much. I want to come to you, Stephen, on this. So the DNC, through its deputy chairperson, communications director, I should say, is on the record now responding to all of this with a pretty blistering, I guess maybe boilerplate in terms of how, sort of anti the White House that they have shown to be on the issue of Russia. But once again, the Trump team is laughably trying to redefine transparency as disclosing information after you have been caught lying. This again is the DNC saying this on the record in response to Jared Kushner talking with the Senate Intel today.
Yeah, well, you'd expect that from the DNC. I mean, that's literally what they're paid to do, is take shots, and in this partisan environment, they can be expected to do that. I think the transparency case that they make more broadly is a fair critique of the White House, as we discussed earlier. If you're disclosing information after it's been requested and you haven't provided it earlier, and it's been reported on, what have you, it's a hard transparency case to make. Now, having said that, the thing that I'm most interested in, or would most like to know that we don't know right now, is what are the conversations like between Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort and his attorney and the president and his attorney with respect to talking in forums like this, this one. I mean, going to
because you're talking and you don't even know what Robert Mueller has.
Exactly.
So
that's
when you have people step up to microphones, it does make certain people really nervous because you're thinking, well, if you get on the record with something outside of the 11-page statement, we don't have a heads up on that, and we don't know what the FBI director has in his special counsel role.
There are ways, certainly, that political opponents of the president and others will point out discrepancies in what you said. I mean, this is one advantage to Jared Kushner doing this behind the scenes, because all we'll get are presumably leaks or descriptions of what he said, as opposed to like the Don Trump Jr. interview with Sean Hannity said when he said, I've told you everything there is to know about this, and then for the next 4 days.
What do we know about Manafort and his attorneys communicating with the White House? You know, obviously Don Jr. and Jared Kushner are going to have a much closer level of coordination with the president and the president's attorneys. But what about Paul Manafort? I mean, that's still a curious relationship because he's certainly not on the inside.
No, it is. I mean, he was, you know, he certainly had relationships with people in what we would broadly understand as Trump world after the campaign, and was seen talking to people.